Well, good morning, everyone. Hello, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and thank you so much for joining me today on the Friday Masterclass, where today we are going back to understanding essentials, exporting, and we're going to talk about somewhere between 5 and 8 different ways of exporting content in Premiere Pro. And if you've been watching the series over the last couple of months, you've noticed that, well, very recently we just did a bunch of updates to Premiere Pro, and specifically with regard to import-export. If you haven't updated Premiere in a while, this may look different to you because we've now changed the look and feel of importing and exporting, specifically exporting. So we're going to talk about that, talk about how to go out to things like AAF and EDLs, how to export images, how to export directly to Frame.io, which we showcased a couple of weeks ago. So all the different ways to just export content and talk a bit about, formats and some other things along the way. Of course, they're coming to you across multiple networks. So hello to everyone watching on Behance, Adobe Live, YouTube, and where else are we going? Oh, we're not going to LinkedIn today. They have something else that took precedence. That's fine. And of course, our friends watching over at No Film School. So thank you so much for tuning in. A couple of quick shouts before we begin. It's always great to see everybody. Tim, Steve, Reverb, Mike, also Tim, Ajay, Studio, Vasna, Michelle, and Garrett. How's it going? Great to see you all. Okay, so we got a lot of stuff to cover, so let's get right into it. I'm going to switch back over to my screen. And we are, of course, picking up where we left off with our content featuring the two-step project that we completely remixed over the last couple of weeks. And before we even do anything, again, there have been some updates to Premiere. I think we just had an update, if not this past week, 2 weeks ago or so, where we kind of revamped the import-export experience entirely, removing the old export. So that's kind of a key. So traditionally, if we were, say, wanting to export this sequence that we see down below, we would go to File, Export Media, or Command-M here, Control-M, and that took us to this other sort of modal dialog that we've shown many times on stream. Well, that has now been replaced by what lives up here in this Export tab at the top of the screen. So this Home button, Import, Edit, Export, these are always there, and this just kind of allows you to a little more freely move between these various modes. So if we want to export now, we can simply click Export up at the top here, and that takes us into this newly redesigned export window. And just to showcase, if you're still, like me, kind of have the muscle memory of doing that Command-M when you're wanting to export something, File, Export Media, it now goes there as well, okay? So that UI that you knew before in that modal dialog, that is gone. Now you still have the same functionality here. It looks a little bit different. I would say it looks a lot better, cleaner, much more direct in terms of you have your destinations of where things can go on the left. If you want to do destination publishing, you have a much cleaner UI design here for just like, I just want to export this, a preset, a format, and then you've got all these already collapsed options around all the various video parameters, video options, audio options, captioning, effects, metadata, etc. Got your video over here on the right, the preview of what it's going to look like, the range, some details about the source and what we're outputting to. I love having this kind of right here, an estimated file size, just cleaner. And then at the bottom, again, something that we couldn't be without, you still, despite this not being that sort of previous modal dialog, you can still export directly. So this export does just what it used to do before, where you kind of never leave the UI, or you can send to Media Encoder to have it render in the background. So again, same thing here, just redesigned. Now, if you've been using Premiere for a while, you probably already encountered this. I was on another machine editing something over the last weekend when we had our break and hadn't updated in a while. Went to go to exported the old school way and just didn't even think about this because this wasn't there yet. So if this looks familiar to you, awesome. If it doesn't, it's the same. Now let's start breaking some of this down because these are really kind of getting into the basics of exporting. All right. And Fernando's saying, I just love the new panel. Very nice. Shanky, why did Adobe update the export page panel? Yeah, largely because we've heard feedback over the years that the old panel was just, one, it hadn't been redesigned in at least 17 plus years, if not more. So it was ripe for some redesign. And also, if you were an old school fan, you kind of knew what to do. It just wasn't that easy to navigate. And again, in terms of flow, something very nice about the way this goes. Like the thing that should be on the end is what you're seeing, what's going out, what's being exported. And it just wasn't like that. So we've really kind of optimized that to look better, to just be more intuitive. So let's start with over here along the left-hand side. So again, by default, of course, we're exporting to a media file. Now, if you so choose to do any kind of direct destination publishing, you can do that. So if you simultaneously want to export and also upload to your YouTube channel, Vimeo, Twitter, Facebook, Meta, Behance, Creative Cloud, or an FTP, you can do that here as well. By the way, I know a couple weeks ago, maybe even longer than that, time is compressed nowadays. We were doing some stuff around Adobe Stock. You'll notice that the direct Adobe Stock export is not here anymore. Maybe we see that come back. I hope we do. You can still, of course, upload content directly at stock.adobe.com into your content portal. It will still do the Adobe Sensei-based machine learning automatic keywording for you, metadata tagging, which is very, very useful, but it's no longer a destination here. And just real quickly, again, if you wanted to say, go out to your YouTube channel, you enable this here, and then, it pulls up the various options here, including, again, you can customize the format. You can see I'm already logged into my YouTube channel here. I can go to a particular, I don't have any playlists in here. Title, description, privacy settings, tags, custom oops, you can't see that, sorry. Custom thumbnail. All right. Delete local file. And then again, all of your additional video options. So it's just a matter of signing into that specific destination if you're wanting to publish there. Okay. So with that said, let's kind of break this down, because again, if you haven't seen this, you might think, okay, yeah, it looks cleaner, but when I go into presets, well, wait a second. Now I only have 8 presets or whatever it is in H.264, the most common format. In the previous dialog, there were 150 H.264 presets. Exactly. And we revealed all of those at once, immediately, and that's great. But in terms of having a sort of clean, functional user experience, clean UI, it was just too much. And we heard feedback from you. I imagine there are many people internally who are like, no, it's fine. Leave all 150 there. I didn't have an extreme problem with it. I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, I always use the YouTube 1080 HD preset. So I'd go into that menu and have to scroll all the way down just to get there. But that doesn't mean we took them away. So again, first thing we're going to do here is, so when you click on this, and again, I'm in H.264. By the way, all of your formats are still here as they were before. So none of that's changed, okay? So the default here is H.264, all right? When we go into presets, again, you have a couple of these here. I think I added this as a favorite, which is why you're seeing the YouTube 1080, or that may even be the last one used. I can't remember how this populates exactly. But then you have more presets. Oh, sorry, you can't see that there. Scrubbing above my head so you can see it. More presets. So when you choose more presets, that just opens the preset manager. And again, up at the top, you can see we have all presets, system presets, custom presets. All right. And then this is everything. And then you can organize by format. All right, so now you see it's doing it alphabetically. So if I just want to see the H.264 ones, okay, here we go. By the way, I just clicked on format. So you can see it's now organizing alphabetically by format, right? DNX, DPX, H.264. All right. And here's all of the H.264 presets. And to my point, you can see as I continue to scroll through that if you were a new user and you're like, I just want to export. There was just a lot in front of your face. That's not to say you can't have them in there, okay? You can. All right. Let's say we wanted the YouTube 720. Okay, again, it tells you all of that. You can add that here, all right? Something like that. And now YouTube 720 is now in the menu. Okay? So you didn't lose any functionality. It's all still there. It's just a matter of making it a little cleaner. And I would say that for many, something like the high quality 1080 or 21 or high quality 4K ones are okay. Honestly, I don't remember let me see the exact attributes. I don't use this one because I think this is a 20 megabit. Okay, that's actually a little bit higher than the YouTube one. So the high quality 1080 is a 20 megabit export. I believe the YouTube one is 16. Yeah, okay. And you might say, well, why would you use 16 over 20? Well, again, if it's going to YouTube and I know what the source content is, not a huge difference. Okay. Now, again, it differs. If we're going 4K, then obviously we want greater than that. The file size is not significantly different. Do 20, do 16. I've always used this preset. I know what it looks like. It looks great. I'm always happy with it. But again, that's why we highlight these high quality match source by default. The match source ones are going to be a little bit lower, right? So if we do like adaptive high bit rate, so strange. I mean, this is like 15.2 megabits. Okay. Sure. How does that differ between that and the YouTube 1080 and the high quality? Well, you're losing about 5 megabits. All right. But my point is, fewer options up front to make it easier just to export that content. All right. But you still have complete access to everything. What's up? Armando, in which case do you recommend using CBR or VBR? Yeah, I mean, you know, that's going back years and years. To be honest, it's just it's a look and feel thing. I don't know that, you know, sometimes CBR, depending upon, again, the source media, what kind of color correction you're using, sometimes constant bitrate does you better. VBR, typically it's going to export a little bit faster. Again, it's variable. So where it doesn't need to use as much, it doesn't. That's kind of the nature of a variable bitrate codec. I used CBR forever. I was like, no, only CBR. In fact, for MP3s, good example. For audio, I don't want any variable bitrate. Always constant bitrate, because I'm an audio snob. And you might say, an audio snob, while you're listening to MP3. Well, I don't. But if I have to make MP3s, I want it constant. For video, again, we're talking 10x file sizes. I think you can get away with a little bit more at times, depending upon the source and where it's going. So it's really a choice. You have to look and see what looks better to you. You know, if I'm shooting something 4K and I want to preserve everything, and I don't know, I don't care about file size, whatever it is, yeah, I may do CBR. Ultimately, you know, you're compressing one way or the other. So you're losing, there's going to be some slight degradation, a little, right? But it's not an absolute in terms of what differs immediately to your eye. So I would try 2 versions. Again, file size will differ, right? If you're maintaining 20 megabits versus a variable bit rate, the file size will likely be different. So there's that consideration. But beyond that, you just have to see what you kind of visually prefer. All right. Thank you, Eugene Nowie. Okay. All right. So let's just kind of talk through a couple of these other things, because again, they're all minimized by default now. And that's in an effort to, again, just keep this interface a little bit cleaner. So when we go under the video tab, all right, so this is where, again, you have manual control and the ability to immediately sort of match source, right? So because I'm using this match source preset, these things are all grayed out. If I wanted to manually modify them, I just click the checkboxes, okay? And now I can change the aspect ratio, right? So I have all this, oh, again, my face is over top of these. So I can change aspect ratio if I needed or wanted to do that. I can change, you know, field order. This is all progressive, you know, let's hope, let's hope we're not dealing with fields anymore. Unless you're working with old DV tapes. I had to transfer or work with some DV footage not long ago. It was for a family project and I forgot. I mean, I know some countries still use interlaced content. Interlaced is just, it kind of feels like what VHS felt like when you got to DV. If many of you or any of you remember that. It's just a lot. So again, by default, you're only seeing these 4 fields. And you're like, but wait a minute, there was so much more in there. Yes, click the More button. So here's where you have render at maximum depth, right? And as we've said before, you're going to use this in particular if you're trying to maintain, you know, you're working in 32-bit float or 16-bit. You're going to a quick time export. You want to keep it at greater than 8-bit. You want to render at maximum depth. Maximum render quality. This one, it's one of those, you think you want it, But why do we not reveal this by default anymore? Because it's really only needed if you're scaling. And the tooltip, let me see, can I bring it up? Yeah. All right. Gives better quality scaling, but increases the encode time. If you're not rescaling the master in any way, you really don't need that checked. If it's 1080 and you're going 1080, you don't need that. If it's 4K and you're going 1080, I'd recommend that. If it's 4K and you're going 720p, I'd recommend that. If you're not changing the scale, it's really, I've done A/B tests. I don't see it. It definitely takes a little bit longer to render, okay? And then you have your alpha channel option there. Time interpolation, again, for frame smoothing and that nature, and you'll have frame sampling, blending, and optical flow. All the other things in here, encoder settings. By default, I believe we're always going to leverage hardware encoding, right, as opposed to software. That's also going to give you a faster render. Here's where, should you want to, particularly for H.264, choose the profile, main, high, baseline, etc. This is where you can do all of that. Color space, all of those kind of things. Again, a lot of that's going to be based on the format and the preset that you choose anyway, which is why those are grayed out by default, okay? But that's where all of that, where those options live. Master and display, color, all these were sort of newer additions over the last couple of years. And then, to our question earlier, the bitrate settings. So we decide, you know what, I want to do CBR, all right, and I want this, I don't want 15.2, I want a 20 megabit CBR, all right, gives you your estimated file size there, and we're good to go, all right? And again, if we were working in VR, this is where that checkbox is. Again, if you actually have VR timelines, VR sequences, and you choose a VR preset, you can make your own, but if you choose a VR preset, this will be checked by default. You don't have to go into these more options to do that, all right? So point being, when you twirl down video, you just see these 4 options, okay? But everything is there under more, okay? It's all still there. We just didn't reveal it, scaring anyone who's never opened the Premiere Export panel before. All right? Some of you may not like that. If you don't like it, tell me. I think it's great. It's, maybe it's just getting older wanting things just cleaner, simpler. It's nice to not have to see it. Especially when 99% of the time, I know I'm using a chosen preset anyway. Keep it clean, keep it lean. All right, audio, similar thing. Of course, there's less parameters under audio, so nothing here really changes. This is what you would have seen in the audio tab before. Format, codec, sample rate, stereo, channels, bit rate. All right, same thing here. Same for multiplexer, for those of you who need that. Captioning. Now this one is essential if you are using our captioning in Premiere Pro. It won't let me enable it because I'm not using captioning here. But under export options, okay, this is where you would be able to effectively choose burn in or external sidecar file, okay? And then again, you can modify the format here, frame rate, etc., the captions. That's where all that lives. Again, that isn't different from what you had previously. It's just cleaner and twirled down. Effects, this is way cleaner, right? And you'll notice that we don't even show you the detail because you're like, wait a minute, I just turn on Lumetri LUT. Where do I select the LUTs? Well, once you select it, now it gives you the parameters. It gives you the options, right? So I think this is wonderful. And this is really well done UI. I don't need to see. That was the thing, is when you went into effects before, some people never knew that we had, as I'm once again in the way, loudness normalization on export because it was all the way at the bottom of the menu. So now you get to see, oh, I can do all of these things. Oh, that's cool. What options do I have for loudness normalization? Well, when you enable it, now you can see, oh, I can choose the loudness standard. Okay, I'm in the US, so I'm going to choose ITU-BS 1770-3. Target loudness, tolerance, max true peak, etc., etc. Okay, all of your options here, nice and clean. Time tuner, I like to point this one out. This is a great one. All right, this is really, for those of you, again, particularly on the NFS side, there may come a time when, and this is a good example, right? So this spot needs to be 1:20, and for whatever reason, my export, it's 1:22. I've got to shave 2 seconds off. Now, being the kind of person I am, I'd probably go back in there and see what I could cut. What the time tuner does is it looks for areas, moments of stillness, no movement, and then it starts to remove frames so that it can retune to fit the appropriate duration. So let's say I wanted this to be 120. What percentage change is that? So that's a 2.43% change. That would be almost visually imperceptible. You wouldn't notice any significant difference to anything. Now, for best results, we typically recommend I think you can go up to 10%, below 10% above. You typically don't want to go beyond about 5%, all right, in terms of the time tuners. Deliverable looking, not weird or not artifacted or messy. About a 5% duration change, you're probably pretty safe. Again, it just saves you the time of having to go through and eliminate 48 frames of nothing. It uses some intelligence to do that automatically, all right? So this is a great one. Again, we don't get to talk about this a lot. You'll see it even has like the skip slates option here. We don't have slates in this, but that's the kind of thing. Like if you're exporting dailies, it'll detect slates and automatically eliminate that from the duration. So again, you gotta buy back some time. It's just a really nice feature. Again, disable it. All those options disappear, keeping the UI nice and clean. Metadata, again, same thing here. You can choose how you want that metadata to appear, sidecar, minimum required, etc. All right. And then under general, these are just some of those other options that we had at the bottom right of the previous export dialog, which was after you render, import your render into the project, use preview files. So this is great. If you have your sequence set up to use, ProRes 422HQ previews, now you might say, well, why is this hidden? That speeds up rendering. Yes, but not everybody uses preview files because you have to have set that up. It's not on by default. So if you want to use preview renders of, let's say you have motion graphics templates in the timeline, or you have some very heavy color effects going on that, again, you wouldn't otherwise be able to play back in real time, so you rendered them in the timeline as you were editing, you can use those preview files. Your render's going to go that much faster because those sections have already been rendered. So that's where you can enter those. And again, we will by default, if you're using proxies, and we do have we've made a lot of updates to proxies. Now, we covered this weeks ago. The update now is that there's some cool auto watermarking features in there. There's just better UI badges to show you when you're working. There's just more visual indicators to let you know that you're working with proxies now. By default, you're not exporting with proxies, but if you want to use proxies in the export, this is where you do that, okay? All right. Okay, so those are the basics of export in the export panel. Now let's take it a step further and go back into the menu to talk about some of the more sort of, I don't want to say non-basic, but let's say you're sharing or wanting to export this scene, this sequence, to someone else to continue color work or additional editing, say you're giving it off to an Avid editor or something like that, or using any of the more sort of open standards like AIF, XML, or EDL. So to do that, you're going to choose our sequence here, back up to our file menu, and we still have reason to go into the export here. And isn't it funny now when you've done this now, it kind of seems like, oh, it almost feels old school to go here, all right? So this is where you can access all of those things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on here. But for instance, AIF, right? We're doing an AIF, all right? Brings up this panel here. Gives you your options. Break audio out to mono. Choose your bit depth, sample rate, files, the format. I'd highly recommend broadcast wave. AIFF is fine. AIF is fine. Render. Handles if necessary. Done. That's how you create an AIF, all right? Similarly, if we're going out to an EDL, a couple more options here. Again, if you've never kind of gone into these dialogues, these are all specific. So you're working with someone who might be using Resolve and like, okay, I want an EDL out of Premiere. This is how you do that. You can see all the various options here. I'm not going to read through all of them. You also have options based on video and all of the various audio tracks and channelization here, which is kind of nice in the EDL. all right? And then the more standard XML directly to Final Cut, right? And the OMF if you're going out to something like Pro Tools. I've had reasonable success with this. I've had more success importing OMFs into things like Audition and stuff. I think we've made some improvements there. I don't know how many people are using OMF. I'm curious if anybody in the chat is using OMF export. AP Productions, how much faster does the use previews speed up your render? Well, it's entirely dependent on what it is, right? So, if, again, let's just say you had a motion graphics, you had some kind of extreme graphical something or lots of effects on this, 3-second section. Well, if you did a preview render and it took you 2 minutes to render the preview, well, that's an additional 2 minutes that it's going to take to render the overall video if you don't use the preview that you've already created. And in general, it actually probably takes even more time, all right? So just real quickly on that. So it's arbitrary. It's going to depend on what you're doing, how complex it is. Let's say you have 3 different Lumetries stacked along with motion, and maybe you have an After Effects comp dynamically linked into here, so you're rendering it in the timeline so that you can see it in real time. It makes sense to render. Maybe you're doing some slow motion with optical flow. And again, you need to render that to really see it in real time while you're editing in Premiere. That stuff can take, even on short clips, can take a long time. So it makes a lot of sense. The way that you set that up in the sequence menu under sequence settings, all right, for those of you unfamiliar. Now again, we've already built this sequence here, but if we were to say choose custom or just something else now, let me choose custom. There's custom, there we go. All right, and I would highly, I always go with QuickTime, not animation. ProRes 422 HQ for me. All right, maximum bit depth, okay. So now, anytime I render something that has effects on it, whatever, it's going to render that using 422 HQ, max bit depth, so we're not losing any fidelity here. So when I go to do my final render, if I've already created those, it's not going to have to re-render those sections in the same way you're going to buy back some time, okay? Why was the export panel made into a page? Does Adobe have plans to introduce more pages for different tools like color correction? That's a good question. Again, I would join the beta. You don't even have to join. You can just download the betas now, right? So in Creative Cloud, you can just download the beta apps. You can send feedback and commentary from within the app real easily. Obviously a lot of people kind of wanted it paged that way. And it also follows a lot of the other things that we're doing in other Adobe apps. So will Lumetri eventually end up as like a paged option? Maybe. For the moment, it's a dockable panel. I mean, we're not getting rid of panels, movable panels anytime soon. But perhaps I could see an example of where maybe we did something like that. But we'd have to have, users telling us, we want that for Lumetri, or we want that for the Essential Graphics panel, or we want that for whatever it is, all right? Okay. Kevin's saying he's using ProRes LT. All right. Okay, so AAF, XML, EDL, got all that. Cool. Oh, and something else. So in that same menu here, now, I don't think I saved, I'm going to make some markers. So this is something that can also be particularly useful if you've got a lot of markers in your timeline. All right. And what I typically, if you're adding markers, oops, I'm doing it on the clip level. Hold on, let me turn this off. If you're adding markers into your timeline, sometimes there's a need to export those markers with some descriptions. There's a number of different cases where you may do that. Sometimes it's for audio cues. Sometimes it's for, this is something you might do in rushes. So I come into a marker here and we'll say check this. I'm just going to add random text and add some colors. Actually, I don't even need to recolor these. All right. This is the coolest. All right, just adding markers here, giving some descriptions. Because this has been asked before, do these work? Can you export the markers as CSV or text? And the answer is yes, you can. So I've just added some markers in here. You know, I'll say like needs sound design. All right. And the reason I'm putting these descriptions in just so that you have something to see. Do this one as well. When we export this, okay, cut this, and thanks. Oh, thanks God watching. Good. Okay. All right. So now that we've got those markers in here, all right, same thing. All right, we can now export those markers through the panel. All right. What else did I want to talk about here? Oh, exporting the sequence as well and the project manager. Okay, so the project manager. This is something which it's part of export because this is something that you may ultimately want to do if you're wanting to minimize the content, archive the content. Okay, 1 second here. All right. Oh, let me just do this first. Okay, so I'm going to export the markers for you real quickly. Sorry, my brain is, I'm like going on multiple cylinders here. Let's put this on the desktop. All right, desktop. There we go. Choose. And you'll see we can make this a CSV, text file, or HTML. Let's just do it as text. There's the scene name. Okay, and I chose the final mix here in the project panel. Don't know why it's not letting you do it from the sequence. That seems a little odd, but okay. Click OK. Successfully exported markers. All right, let me just bounce over to our desktop. Here it is. All right, just open that. And there you go. And that's what this looks like. Okay. So it gives us the asset name, gives us the time code, and it gives us the description. Okay. So just one more export option there for markers. Okay. Exporting the sequence. So we can take this entire sequence and we can send this whole thing over to Audition. So I just showed you doing sort of AAF, OMF, EDL, XML. That's going to another application, another NLE or editing environment outside of ours. You also have the ability to do it from within. So if you wanted to continue working on this in Audition, up under Edit in Adobe Audition Sequence, you can do that as well. I'm not going to actually do this now. What? Did I not update? What? Audition's not updated? That's impossible. It is updated. What's up with that, Kevin? I saw you're in there. I just updated it a day ago. Okay, maybe that's just a bug, that little dialogue, because it let me go to the dialogue anyway. Key is, this is now going to send, right? We've shown this before, everything from Premiere Pro over to Audition. So you can send the video either exported, flattened, or through dynamic link. That's non-rendered, right? Which will allow you to keep the video live, so you can continue to work on sort of color correction and other things while you're cutting audio to picture, right? Your audio handles all your various in Premiere clip effects. You can transfer, you can render or remove. Same with audio track effects, pan and volume, and then open the whole thing in Audition if you so desire. This is particularly useful, again, because if you're doing stuff with Essential Sound like we did here, anything that you've done in Essential Sound will translate over to Audition as well. So you don't lose any of the work that you've already done, including any work that you may have done in the audio track mixer, which again, we did a lot here, right? We created a submix. We've got a lot of different effects. We've got some various track effects and clip effects. All of that carries over non-destructively, okay? Okay. Project Manager, let's go back to that. It's my brain fired off and I went there too soon. So once again, Project Manager, now this has been revamped over the last couple of years. A couple things that I've recently learned about this and run into that I'm going to point out when we go to do this. So this is particularly a useful export for two reasons. One, if you've been working on something, you've cut it together and you've been working with this massive array of footage, and now it's done, the project is over, and we just want to archive this. This is the best way to do it. And it can be done in two different methods, all right? You can collect just all the files and copy everything to a new location. That's probably going to be most people. You also, in doing so, can then say to exclude anything that you didn't use. So once again, if you're trying to archive and you're not interested in all the B-roll that you didn't use in the archive of this project, this is a great way to do that. And I've done this many, many times, super useful. The other thing you can do is you can consolidate and transcode. And this, for archive purposes, can also be really useful if your project contains lots of different media formats and you just, for the purposes of easier future reuse, or, maybe you were going to transcode the H.264s or whatever into QuickTime or something you never did. It's just an easy way to get everything into a consistent format. Okay, I think we give you three. Yeah, so you can do DNX HR HD, MXF OP1A, or your flavor of QuickTime, whatever it is, okay? Really simple, makes a lot of sense to do this, all right? Again, you can exclude things that you didn't use. You can adjust your handles here, converting image sequences to clips. I'm going to come back to this renaming media files in just 1 second here, all right? And then you do your calculate. All right, so now, again, but somehow, because I'm going to ProRes, right. So the original project, can you see that down there? Let me just scroll back up. The original project was 1.77, but because I'm going to a ProRes 422 HQ, I'm not making it smaller because a lot of the footage in there was H.264, right? Okay, so let's say if I just did the copy to a new, but I still excluded, let's recalculate. Okay, so now we're just copying, we're not changing any formats. Now you can see the original was 178, the new one's gonna be 102, okay? Coming back to this here, so I just did this. I actually did this process. Now again, this was not my project, this isn't my movie, this was someone else's. I recut some of this, but I didn't change any of the naming or anything that they'd already done to certain clips. So I did not enable rename media files to match clip names. So what happened was, apparently, there were some clips in here that were named the same thing, even though they were different parts of a scene. So it overwrote, it didn't wind up working the way I wanted to. So if you're going to separately rename clips, which sometimes you do, I'll do this often as something is in the timeline, I might give it a specific name so I can find it or just relocate it later. I recommend using the rename media files to match clip names option. It's going to make things just a lot easier to work with, less likely to incur any issues that I did where I had a much longer clip01.mp4, and for whatever reason when it exported it was taking different sections. Maybe it had something to do with the selections. I'm not exactly sure. Once I did rename media files, everything was back to normal. All right. You also have, of course, the option here to choose any and all of the sequences in the project that you want to include in this newly managed, collected, and consolidated version of the project. So this is super useful, again, for archiving, for getting things more concise. If you're going to do any renaming, highly recommend this option here. And then the preview files and audio conform. Typically, I include preview files. I don't generally include the audio conform. They don't take very long to generate anyway, right? Compared to preview files. So I usually uncheck that. But feel free to also not include preview files. That just means when someone opens this up or you open it up later, if you've got that section that has some kind of After Effects, something. By the way, you can also see you can convert After Effects comps to clips. So if you have a dynamically linked composition in the timeline, it'll basically render it to its own clip if you want, if that option is enabled, okay? So that's all available to you as well. Okay. Yeah, InDesign is really, really good at that. Eugene, again, I highly recommend that that rename option. That's what did it for me, because I had this same issue. I'm very honest with you about these things. I just did it. And I went to open this yesterday, and this particular clip, it was what the original clip 2. I think there's 2 things in here called clip 2. So that are different sources. They just happen to be named the same. Blah. Right? So it didn't do what I wanted. So when I rechecked that box, it worked. But also some of it was they renamed some of these things the same. So I don't know if it would have worked either. I had to like fix it a little. So that was really editor error, self-inflicted editor error. Not me, but the previous person who'd worked on it. I'm not blaming anybody. Anyway, all right. Okay, 2 more things to do. So, talking a lot about exporting the entire video. One of the things that I love in particular when shooting with like the iPhone 13 Pro Max in ProRes 422 HQ HDR is that the frames are gorgeous. And if I want to do a frame export, I can do it directly from the video. And again, I think this button is, I always have it revealed. I don't think it's revealed by default. You do have an export frame option in Premiere. Again, if you don't see this little camera icon, you will find it in the button editor here, and you can just drag that button in. So let's say I wanted to export this frame. Click on Export Frame. All right, and this is Dell, right? Dell Intense Frame. Choose your format. All the standards there. All right, I usually choose TIFF, especially like if I'm going to use this for promotional purposes. Maybe I'm going to touch this up or do something in Photoshop. I'll generally use a TIFF. All right, tell it where you want it to go, and then I can import it into the project, right? Or change the location, whatever. So, okay. There it is. So, quick and easy way to export a frame. That function's been in there forever. But especially today, right? You're shooting something on a, Sony A7S flavor, or, an Alexa or Red. It's not, of course you're going to take production stills from the video. A lot of people aren't aware that we just have that function. Now you can also just like screenshot it or whatever as a ping, but you have that functionality right there. So that one I love. All right. And the last thing, wow, we got through all of this. I'm glad we did. Last thing that I want to cover here is Frame.io. Now we had the Frame guys on a couple weeks ago. We kind of showed you that process, and I just wanted to re-emphasize here that as Creative Cloud users, you all have access to Frame.io and sharing with anybody. So they don't even have to be Creative Cloud members. Let's say you want to send it to a friend and go, hey, what do you think about this before I publish it to YouTube or wherever? You can export into Frame and do just that. So let's take this this scene here. All right, let's say I want to do a quick frame export of this. So this is a bit of the raw footage here, not color corrected. Webb getting a little upset after he just got chewed out. Right, kicks the table. Now again, maybe we want to send this for someone to review as a flat scene. Maybe this is an opportunity to add a LUT or whatever. Doesn't matter. We're not going to do that now. Okay. In fact, in 2 weeks, I think we have, or 3 weeks, we're doing an essentials on the Lumetri color panel. We're going to cover adding looks and creative LUTs. All right. So the way that you do it is, again, now I can render this and upload into Frame. All right. Now I can even also, we were just talking about markers. I could say, I could add a marker in here. So this is something that the person on the other side would be able to see. Web contemplative. Does this shot make you anxious? Okay. I don't know. All right. And I'm going to add another marker here. And make some description. Blur. Good motion blur. All right. Once I've done what I want to do here, from within the frame panel itself, all right, and you'll log in with your Adobe ID, same that you would use to log into the Creative Cloud desktop app. We're going to go to Upload. We're going to choose Active Sequence. All right. Again, list of options here, nice and clean. So Web 1080, Web 720, ProRes 422. Now, if this is just meant to be for someone's review, you can choose. Let's do 720 for the heck of it, a little faster export here. We can do the whole sequence. All right, we don't need to keep the rendered file. Export markers as comments. So what I did was, by adding those comments, when those are reviewed by people, they're already going to show up as time-coded sections that they can click on, go shuttle right to, and then read the comment. And then auto-versioning, okay? Oh, you can't see that, sorry. Export markers as comments, and then click Upload. All right, and you'll see it begins launching Media Encoder in the background, right? Which I've already, since updating, have done. It's launching. Oh, you can see it there. All right, it's launching. If you have that open, it'll go a little bit faster. You can see it's quickly rendering. So you can see it simultaneously now, doing both. It's uploading, generating the thumbnail, right? And boom, there it is. It's now done and ready to share for review, okay? And now we can add anybody into this. So anybody who's got access to the web can do this. Also, I didn't plug my phone in for this, but just to show you here real quickly, let's see if we can get this on camera. It's not gonna focus. Arg! Of course not, because this is not auto-focusing here. But I don't know if you can see test scene right there. That's the clip. That's the clip we just uploaded. You just gotta have to believe me. There it is. Oh, and there's my comments as well. But all right. So here's Webb getting annoyed. Is it playing back? Play. Oh, there it is. Right? There it is. It's already there, okay? Super cool. Now, as we showed you before, so you can see this is the full sequence. I did this already in Frame a couple days ago, marked it for review. So here's what's so cool about this. So as you send this out, let's say people make comments, whatever. You click on this, okay. So now on the left, we have the video in Frame. And again, I can choose, I can go to a comment. It shuttles to that moment, right? You can see my little, again, we're always marking up blown out highlights, right? That's all it's good for. No, it's not. Right? Check sync, love this moment, etc. Right? But do you notice what's happening in the sequence, in the timeline? It's following along. So as we scrub through in Frame, it's following along in Premiere. All the cursors are synchronized. So what that means is, as I go to this comment, right, and I shuttle through it, and I can see it down here, and I'm at the exact time code where he's saying, okay, the highlights are blown out. I go, okay, yeah, you're right. Let's fix that. So I don't want to redo all of my UI right here, but okay, that's this clip. Okay. Let me fix my highlights a little bit there. I have to pull those way down. All right, increase our shadows ever so slightly. Okay, I can kind of see what that looked like in the reference.
But Dwayne,
right. Now we can see what it looks like here better, and I can now mark this complete, right, or not. So you have this beautiful direct integration. Similarly here, if you go to this one, right? Does this make you anxious, right? Here's what the reviewer would see at the specific time codes. And I can click on those and you'll see in the Premiere timeline, it shuttles directly to those comments, all right? So this is it just works so well, all right? And it's completely tied back to the sequence. So it's really effortless. And the nicest thing is when you share it for review, as we did, let me see this. What does the dialogue look like for that? Right? So you can copy a link, okay? That's one easy way. Or, again, up here, you can just add people to the project. All right? So I've got a project here called Testing New Frame. I can just add people in here, so then they have access to all of this. All right? Makes it even easier. So the frame integration is so great. It's I mean, dare I say, frictionless? Has there ever been a more marketing-y comment? It's frictionless, but it is. And everything just works, and all your cursors and timelines are moving in sync. You can mark stuff off. You can always call out blown out highlights. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? Because they always seem to do that when you're doing frame. You always see, where is it? Yeah, the arrows. Draw an arrow. Let's circle some blown out highlights. It's a prerequisite. It won't work unless you make an arrow and circle blown out highlights. I'm kidding. That looks perverse. Let's undo all of that. All right. Anyway, you get the idea. So, my friends, we did it. We did it all. We did it all in time. That break last week was good for me. Kept me on my toes. You also witnessed my brain firing a little too fast earlier. Sorry about that. Patrick from Zimbabwe, great to see you. Thank you so much. Omar, CBR depends on resolution. Which one is recommended for 4K and 8K? No. It's whether or not you want a constant bit rate or a variable bit rate. It doesn't matter. Again, this is what I was saying before, is it's going to affect file size. So if you have a constant bit rate, variable bit rate is usually a little smaller. And if you use like a 2-pass variable bit rate, it's sometimes even smaller. Render times will also vary between CBR, VBR 1-pass, VBR 2-pass. So, in general, look, if you're wanting the best compressed, you can't even say that because sometimes VBR looks better. It just does. It's dependent on the content though. And that has to do with how saturated and how desaturated. And it's just, especially with H.264. So you're just going to have to look and see. I'm not super concerned about the minute differences that few people will ever detect via YouTube of my content. So I like that. So I use a VBR 1-pass at 16 megabits for 1080p. Now, if you're in 8K, you probably want to use VBR because that file is going to be massive, right? But again, is it going to look better if you do CBR? Maybe at the same bit rate, maybe not. You just have to try it. I always recommend try it on a small, something that has a lot of something like, this frame where there are blown out. I mean, this is flat. There's no color correction here. So, but something where there's a lot of extreme color. If your levels are hot or kind of right at the edge. Particularly if you're working like 8K, maybe not HDR, but you're kind of pushing the limits of Rec 709 or something like that. That's where you may do a quick CBR version at the same bit rate as the VBR 1-pass, and then see which looks better. And if you're like, oh, you know what, I'm seeing artifacting, or I'm seeing, artifacting or just like pixelation. Okay, now I'm gonna go CBR, not VBR. It's not absolute. You have to look at it. Okay. All right, AP. I'm having to pre-render so much, having lots of After Effects link composition, so this will be helpful. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having those rendered and then using those preview files speeds things up massively. Reverb Mike is adding, Steve Jobs didn't wear deodorant. His office probably had a smell. Well, thank you for that. Armando, Jason, what's coming for future updates in Audition? Armando, I wish I knew. If I did, I couldn't say anyway, but I don't know. All right. Tanya, how's it going? Cody Bear, thank you so much. Great seeing everybody. We're going to end right on time today. So until next week, thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. And we will see you again next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.